Oof, that was brutal. Rip poor double darts. My gosh, that was I don't remember the last time I've seen a death that brutal in an anime in a long time. And it's so funny because my mindset immediately goes this idea of like, they'll be fine. Anime very rarely kills off characters that look so unique and everything. But nope. It didn't dawn on me until a bit later that, yeah, that was technically her shoulders that were going above her pigtails. Girl got flayed into like, I don't know, like 20 pieces of meat. Ugh, that was rough. That was rough. Episode of 8 of Undead Murder Farce was... There's a side of me that's like a little bit disappointed because it does seem like the production values are coming down just a little bit. But it's still like visually directed really well. It's just, we're now getting to that point where it feels like a lot of the shots of actual things connecting aren't being shown. So instead we're having like maybe a hand swipe across the screen, you hear a noise, and then somebody flies up against the wall, which is a little bit unfortunate. But despite that, like I said, it's still got that really great directing in there. Like when it has something that's kind of casually happening, you'll see these really cool shots. Like I really love the whole shot with Tsugaru and he's pulling his suspenders out, and it shows it from an angle of his chest so you can see the strap come back towards him. Or when he's looking down, he's trying to figure out what is his point of doing things, which is, I think, a bigger part of this episode overall. He sees Ayarindo inside of the blood. I really love that creativity that this director has. Like I said, for those who don't know, Kaguya-sama Love is War, Shogun Roku, this director is so good at what he does. He just doesn't make it the sum of what's happening in the scene, but rather transcending it with some sort of symbolism or really great perspective shots. But yeah, I didn't really cover last week's episode because it just felt like it's just a lot of fighting. And yes, granted, this episode is a lot of fighting as well, but of course, the big things in this episode is really around Tsugaru, it's around James Moriarty, it's around Ayarindo. Everybody's sort of interconnected at this point to this one big grander scheme, which is James Moriarty apparently is trying to create the perfect beings. He's experimenting on people and creating monsters that are perfect. And that seems to be his focus, is to gathering multiple types of monsters, gathering parts from different people, Ayarindo, her immortal body, and trying to fuse them all together to create the perfect self. And this apparently started happening back like 8 years ago when he lost to Sherlock, and then he had Jack come up out of nowhere, say, please infuse me with a bunch of stuff, and he created this perfect being. Well, not perfect yet. He still wants other beings, which includes werewolves. Which, yes, to the credit of the show itself, that was a little bit differently than what I was expecting, because the initial introduction of this whole gym was this idea of, I was speculating, is it Lupin trying to find the werewolves, or is he a werewolf that's trying to protect the werewolves? Is one of these groups the dwarves? But no, it seems like it's all kind of been transcended by what James Moriarty wants it for, which is to find the werewolves. But yeah, Shizuku fighting Carmilla, which turns into pretty much a Huffy Puffy fest. I like the later parts of that whole thing, because you have this whole fight happening, and then as she's nearly about to lose, Shizuku finally gets that last little push that she needs to fight back, and then it kind of turns this whole thing of like, I've known somebody longer that has a lot more experience than you, which would be Ayarindo, which makes me wonder at this point. I don't know, that's probably just a translation issue, but that was a really weird thing to say, following Carmilla, like, on top of her, and then she pushes her away, and she's like, I could have gave you, like, some joy or something like that, and she's like, no, I know somebody that has longer experience than you, and again, that would obviously refer to Ayarindo, and it's like, well, what is she doing with Ayarindo? It's obvious that Shizuku takes care of Ayarindo, which does make me wonder how old Shizuku is. I'm assuming that Shizuku is getting some sort of immortality from Ayarindo, that she's been with her for a long time, or it's just the lineage of Shizuku has been taking care of Ayarindo. Then, of course, we have Fatima Double Darts. She's fighting Phantom and losing miserably, which, again, rip Fatima, as it all kind of comes together, and Jack the Ripper finally shows up, and oh gosh, that was brutal. That was brutal. Like I said, at first I was like, okay, it's just a scratch, and then like it cuts over, and Tsugaru's has her heart, and I'm like, wait, why does Tsugaru, did he just plunge his hand into her chest and take it out? No, her entire body was cut into a million pieces, and she just picked up the heart that apparently didn't get sliced in pieces. Okay, and then it cuts over, and he's like, oh, you used her heart, and I'm like, wait, why did he do that? And then it didn't dawn on me that was like a flaying out of meat on top of that box, and it cuts down to the head. So I'm like, okay, she got beheaded. I didn't realize she got flayed into like 6 pieces. It was like, oof, that is Super brutal. So I don't think Fatima's coming back. I'm just gonna go on a limb here and say Fatima's not coming back from that. Yeah, very, very brutal. Reynolds just gets knocked out of the way, but it does seem like he at least calls out Fatima as he's getting knocked out. So it seems like, at least, despite the fact that he was treating her terribly, it seemed like, for the most part, just a commanding officer, obviously, it did seem like he was a little bit upset by Fatima getting cut into a million pieces. But yeah, Tsugaru faces off against Jack, and this is, like I said, this is where we're getting the bigger picture of things, as we find out that Tsugaru came from basically the same place as Jack. That James had this big plant build up, and he was doing all these experiments on mixing Oni with people. Obviously, Tsugaru was one of them. He apparently fled at some point. All the other people besides Jack were failed experiments or disposed of, but it seems like Jack has gotten a little bit more infused into him than Tsugaru. He's since that point apparently been infused with a vampire and stuff. And it does seem like now that Tsugaru is working with Aya, both of them have been infused with blood or saliva from Aya Rendo. It's just, again, Jack has the leg up because he's been infused with a vampire. But I like the fact that at some point Jack questions, like, so what are you here for? Like, why are you chasing after us? You're obviously coming after James Moriarty. Do you want revenge? Are you looking for a cure of what you are, which is part Oni? And like I said, that was the big telling point of this whole thing, is how Tsugaru sort of paused. He looks down, he sees in the blood, you see that reflection of Aya Rendo, but he's really questioning at that point, yeah, what am I here for? But he doesn't agree to any of those things. It's not that he wants revenge, it's not that he wants to get rid of this curse. He just specifically, instead of saying Aya Rendo, which he's envisioning, he's saying, I'm putting on a show. We're a sideshow. That's all I'm here for. Which, yes, does technically play into our initial impressions of Tsugaru. This is all a game. It's all a big act. He was doing his performance in those cage matches over and over again, waiting for the moment that he gets taken over so that he can slaughter them all. He wanted to put on the grandest show. So yes, you can sort of say that does sort of carry on into Aya Rendo, and the idea that, well, maybe that's what he was supposed to do. This is a new show that I can be a part of, and it's a lot more grandiose than being a part of this sideshow. But I think the more telling thing, my prediction here, yes, he sees Aya Rendo in the reflection, and it makes me believe that he was going to say, I'm doing this to help her because I felt bad about her, but he chose to help her out kind of on a whim. It was very quick. It's not like he had some deep backstory of her and he fell in love immediately with her. He's been helping her out for a reason. My prediction is that the one that went with James Moriarty to get Aya Rendo was Tsugaru. Because it does imply this idea that Jack and Tsugaru and all the other people that were tested on were infused with the Oni. Many of them went crazy, but then, of course, Jack and Tsugaru would be the ones that remained. But then it cuts to James Moriarty got the body from Aya Rendo and then infused her blood into Jack the Ripper. There you go. So you have this whole experiment happens. Tsugaru and Jack the Ripper survive through it. Tsugaru goes with James Moriarty. They go out. Tsugaru detaches Aya Rendo from her body, brings the body back, and then probably flees that point, and then James Moriarty infuses the body into Jack the Ripper. Because there is a gap there. And it seems to imply this idea that Tsugaru thinks of Aya Rendo, which, again, isn't necessarily because he wants to help her, unless he wants to help her because he feels guilty. So that's where I think that's going. And I think that's the only reason why we didn't have Tsugaru meet up with James Moriarty in this whole fight. I think the writer wanted to keep them separate because that's obviously going to be a very telling thing. If James Moriarty sees Tsugaru, he's going to go, oh, there's the one that took your body. Isn't that great? I think that's where they're going to go with this whole thing. But yeah, other than that, I really did like a lot of the interactions of this one. Alistair and all the weird stuff that he's talking about, the chemistry between him and Aya Rendo in the middle of this fight, just the casual conversation. That's really what I like, because if you think about it, Aya Rendo is just sitting in that cage. Like, any of these bad guys can just take her out. Like, not really take her out because she's an immortal, but cause her some sort of pain. I mean, even with Alistair, he could have just thrown one of these things at her. He didn't know that she was immortal. You could assume that she's immortal because she's a talking head. But why would he never have attacked her with one of his pins? Unless the obvious thing there is that she's not a threat to me, obviously. I need to focus on these guys over here that have guns. But I like that kind of confidence that Aya Rendo has. Even though she's sitting there and she's literally a sitting duck, she just has this casual conversation with Crowley about different things. Obviously, that she had her body taken away and that he's like, oh yeah, we have one of those. That's probably yours. It's just, I do love I do love the chemistry in this series, and the whole interaction with Suzaku coming back to the room and Tsugaru eyeballing her. It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. Anyhow, all that said, still a fantastic series. Love the chemistry. Amazing directing. Yes, a little bit on some of the animation this time around. And yeah, like I said, a lot of the intrigue that I have right now is around Tsugaru and what his involvement with Moriarty actually was, and if he's possibly what separated Irendo from her body. But anyhow, that's my thoughts on episode 8 of Undead Murder Farce. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure that like button down below, comment, let me know what's the episode. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button's good on my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list if it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support the channel more, you like what I do here, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate everybody does, and y'all take care.